Hey there, gang. It is time for another grading video. This time we will be taking a look at some X-Men books from the Bronze and Copper Age. And kind of neat, in the stack, we have a lot of multiples of the same book. So that, I hope, will help to give you some clear examples, some concrete guidance as to the different grades and what to look for by being able to look at the same book signed by each in different grades. So if you like comic books, stick around. We're going to have some fun. Hey there, Bubby. Welcome to Shanghala. My name is Duke, and this is a grading video. As always, I am grading these books for sale on eBay. The seller name is dotcomcomics, and I hope that by letting you look over my shoulder as I work at grading, it will help you to improve your own grading skills, maybe give you some tips and tricks, things to think about, certainly things to make me aware of if there's anything I say that you think is just, bat loco crazy. But also, I hope it's helpful because I do grade comic books pretty much full time. It's about 80% of my work week. So I like to think that, although this is a subjective art, that nobody is 100% perfect at grading, I like to think I'm as good as anyone, that I know as much as anyone. So if you're fairly new to collecting or buying and selling comic books, you certainly want to be, up on your grading skills so that you don't get ripped off when you're trying to buy a book, so that you don't, get a reputation as a bad seller. If you're trying to sell books, people won't deal with you if they think the books they get from you are just not properly graded. So anyway, enough of the preamble. Let's go ahead and get right down to work. So again, these are some Bronze and Copper Age X-Men books. And the first thing I do when I look at a book, and I will, by the way, bring the book up what seems fairly close, because when I grade, I take my glasses off, and hopefully I won't get my head into the shot and have to edit myself out. But yeah, I get right up close on the book. But anyway, a book that is, let's say, near mint is obviously like new. One or two minor defects. A very fine, you're going to have maybe 5 to 7 individual defects, little spine ticks or things like that. But, the book should look, again, almost new. You might think it's new at first glance until you look close and you're like, oh wait, I see this, I see that. A book that is in fine condition, which is kind of what we're looking at right here with this X-Men number 100. It has some obvious wear, some obvious defects, but it still looks well preserved, well handled. It is not at all objectionable. Not the kind of thing that you would not want in your collection at all, which, as we go down the scale, we start maybe turning our noses up. A very good book, more defects, more obvious, and a good book is, this is kind of the irony, the nomenclature, a good book is for collectors not good. That's when you're getting into the beat to hell range. So anyway, if we look at this book here, we've got here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, about 12 little ticks, all kind of minor. You might not even see them there on the camera. Maybe here, in that black part's probably where you can see it the best. So that's obviously, that's going to put us right down to, fine, maybe even fine minus. Fine is a 6.0, fine minus 5.5. We've got some blunting here on this corner, and some wear down here at the bottom, or it looks like somebody kind of muckled onto it a little bit. The edges are otherwise okay. You've got some little dents right here where something pressed on it. The other edges are pretty good, but the book still has nice gloss. It's nice and flat, and so it looks good that way. The back cover looks nice. Very few of those ticks we saw on the front are transverse, going all the way around to the back, so that's good. We always want to look at the inside. The paper quality is getting, it's off-white, maybe on the edge of tan. If we look at the centerfold, we can see the staples are tight, so everything's intact there. And along this area, you want to look for the Marvel value stamps. Make sure, nothing's been cut out of the book. So I'm going to call this book a fine. I don't think there's enough. If you look like in an Overstreet grading guide and you look at the chart for the maximum and minimum number of defects, well, something, 13, 15 spine ticks, plus, these other things that we mentioned, you're getting into the 15, 20 range. You're getting down into very good range. But these are all so minor that it's just the sheer preponderance of them, the number of them that keeps us, in a lower grade. I'm going to call this still a fine. I think that's got a lot of, really this only thing that's kind of unsightly is this little bit of wrinkling or denting down here at the bottom. The blunting you kind of notice here, but all of these ticks, you just barely notice them. So even though there's a high number of them, it's still a good looking book. So I'm going to call that a fine, a 6.0. And I invite you to leave your comments down below. Let me know what you think if you disagree. And we'll look next at number 108. And this one's probably going to be a fine minus. And you may be like, well, why? Because we see there are fewer, in fact, almost no ticks along the spine. The spine looks very nice, but we've got some blunting here. We've got some blunting here that's fairly unsightly and right in there. And then up at the top here, we've got a fairly significant dent, where it almost looks like the book was dropped and compressed in right here. There's also the issue, and a lot of people don't take into account color gloss, especially when they're buying and selling online, because it's so hard to tell from a photo. But this book is kind of faded a little bit. The colors aren't quite as bright as they could be. The gloss, if I move that around, you don't see a lot of reflectivity. The gloss is kind of coming off. It's just kind of worn off with time and age. And that's all, it's kind of a matter of storage conditions. This is obviously not a book that was manhandled in any way other than this drop, but just storage conditions, likely temperature and things like that. The gloss has been lost. The back cover looks good, although we do have, again, some ticks here that, unlike the other book, do come all the way around. We have a stamp here. It says September 15th a.m. And that is probably, with a December cover date, that's probably an arrival date. The store probably put that on there to help them know when they got the book, to help them know when to pull it off, because newsstands only had so much space. They couldn't display every magazine and every book for the full 3 months that the comic book distributors wanted the book displayed before it was pulled. And so they would pull it, throw it under the counter or whatever, after, say, 1 month. Pages are a little better than that last issue, but still maybe kind of verging on off-white. But everything's tight. So I actually think now, well, and you have a little warping right here. I think I am going to go ahead and call it a 5.5. I almost thought I might upgrade it to a 6. And by the way, these arrival dates, unless they're really unsightly, that's sort of a minimum defect. I mean, it is less desirable than a book that doesn't have this stamp on it. But as opposed to something where the owner of the book wrote on it or did stamps or whatever, something that is obviously something that was done by the retailer, meaning the book had to be purchased this way. There was no way that it could not be purchased with this defect on it. It's tend to be, it's viewed with a little less severity than some other types of defects. But I think I am going to go ahead and call it a 5.5. I was verging on calling it a 6, but I think I'm going to stick with a 5.5. And now we have a case where we do have two of the same book. These are both newsstand copies. You can tell by the UPC code. And getting into this era, that's something you want to check and make a notation of in your description or your listing, if you're selling it online, because getting into this era, 35 cents, so this is what, 77, 78, it's getting to be where sales in the comic book stores are starting to overtake sales on the newsstand. And so a newsstand copy is oftentimes, a little less common than one that was sold in a comic book store, and also less common in high grade because they tended to go not to collectors but to the more casual buyer. And so a lot of times a newsstand copy will bring a premium over a direct sales copy. And you can tell a direct sales copy from this era because the UPC code will have a line through it, or it just won't be there. And then later on, Marvel changed the box up top, the price box, to really help differentiate, because it wanted to know when it was getting returns. It wanted to make sure all the returns were legitimate from the newsstand, with nothing from direct sales getting, folded in, because of course, the direct sales books were sold on a non-returnable basis. So these books look pretty similar, actually. You can see here. And I think, no, 111 was my first issue as a kid, I think. Either 110 or 111. This is 112. Both of these issues look pretty similar. So this one might not give us much of a, much to go on. Well, I think this one's going to be the one in lower grade, because you can see, and if you could feel a lot more going on here. So let's take a closer look. Get those glasses off and let's see what we've got here. So we've got some little wear on this corner. A little bit of color fade up here at the top. Some blunting right there, an indentation. And then we've got some spine ticks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. One there. And on the back side, you can see a little bit more. There's no actual tears, but you can see some divots and some indentations, maybe right in here. You can see that, and along here. So this isn't going to be an 8.0 just because of what we've got going on there on the spine. A little start of a fold right there. Let's look inside, make sure everything's nice. The paper looks good. A little whiter than we have seen. It almost feels like the bottom is a little warped. Can you see it there? Hopefully you can see that edge. I don't know how well you'll be able to pick that up. But there is some warping here. It's not moisture damage. It's not water damage. It is most likely just humidity. With the humidity, the book kind of warped a little bit. It's not so noticeable that it's going to be a huge defect. But I think this book's going to be a 7.5. And a 7.5 is a very fine minus. Let's look at this other one. Overall, this is a better looking book. You got some blunting here, but you don't have the moisture damage, but you have like a bend here. And can you see kind of, I want you to be able to see it. Some damage right in there. And you have some wrinkles right in here. How well can you see that? Maybe in the light. Whoops, well, that gets it off the camera. You got a little bit of a stain on the back here. and then some blunting along the whole of the top. So this is one of these things where you got to be really careful, because initially I thought this was going to be the lower grade book, but as I got looking, I feel like this is the lower grade book. So this one I'm calling a 7.5. This one I'm going to call a 7. It's not quite so bad as a 6.5. Actually, I am going to call it a 6.5, just because that damage there is a little more than a 7. If you can see here in this corner, and the stain on the back. But that's a nice 6.5. That's a very presentable 6.5. But it does go to show how in the mid to high grades, it doesn't take a lot to really move a grade, when I'm calling this a 7.5 and this a full point down a 6.5. Anyway, I hope this is useful to you. Here again, we're looking at two of the same book. And here we have a much more noticeable difference on these two, as you can see just by that spine. Or hopefully you can see. See, the problem is that I don't really have like YouTube lights. I'm using a desk lamp that is great for grading, but not so great for YouTubing. So let's do the higher grade one first. And you can see here, we get a little blunting here, some wear along that bottom edge. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ticks, 7, 8, 9, 10 or so ticks along the spine, a little blunting there, but it's nice and bright and presentable. Get a little divot there in the middle. The back looks good. This spine's got a few stresses, but not nearly as much as one of the recent issues that we looked at there. You can see in the edge we've got some kind of a dent here, but that's minor. Pages look nice. Centerfold is nice and tight. Inside covers look nice and white. So I think this book, now here's something you really can't see probably, but there's a wrinkle right in here, right here where I'm tracing with my thumb. There's kind of a wrinkle. But for that, I might have called this an 8, although you've got two stresses there that are fairly heavy. But I think I'm going to go again with a actually, this one I think I'm going to call a 7. I'm going to call this one a 7. And now let's look at this one. Wow. Again, we have some bends here, some significant wear on this corner, some multiple. You can see that's been folded back multiple times. Stress along the bottom, a lot of wear here on the edge. Storm's got kind of her eye gouged out. Some significant wear here on the top, and again, those corners are bent. And it's a little more, if you can see here in the light, right in here, there's some more indentations. The back is fairly well soiled. And the pages are a little tan. You've got some folding here, some dog ears. It also looks like the centerfold is detached from the top staple. So this one, it's either a 4, a very good, or maybe even a 3.5. Got a lot of stressing along the side here. I would probably call it a 4, except for the soiling here that I don't really like. and the fact that the centerfold is detached from the top staple. And that is, if you are selling, you want to have a little bit of integrity, and you want to make sure you list, in your description, if not in the actual title, say on eBay, but in the description of the book, you want to list any defects that are not apparent in the scan. And you should use a scan rather than a photograph. Photographs are nobody's friend, no matter how close you get to the book with the camera. You always want to go for a scan. And don't buy unless somebody is offering a scan rather than a photograph. But if you're selling, use a scan, and in the description, put in, describe any defect that is not readily apparent in the scan, such as centerfold detached from top staple. You will find that you do that, and you're going to gain some trust from your buyers, and over time, people will come back to you. You won't have to depend on cultivating first-time buyers over and over and over again. You will get a repeat returning clientele. So I am calling this book a 7. And boy, I could almost go a 7.5, but I think a couple of those ticks are just too strong. And there's just a little bit of wrinkling there. So that's a 7. And this one I'm going to do a 3.5 on this. 3.5 being a very good minus, just because this is not, if this was just one fold or two folds, it would be one thing, but it almost looks like it was rolled, and you've got about 20 different folds right in there. And same up here, and all of that stressing, the soiling. It's just, I don't know. It's not a bad book. You could get this fairly inexpensively, and it's complete. It's solid. There's nothing missing, but it's just not very sightly. So 7, 3.5. There's your difference. What do you think? All right, 114. This one, again, decent eye appeal. No real major ticks, but, some stresses along the spine. A good 8 or 9. Blunting in that corner and that corner. Some stressing here. A little stressing up there at the top. This back here, though, is much nicer than some of the others we've looked at, where we've had some wrinkling, not really tears, but wrinkling you've seen on the other ones, just from the stress of being opened and closed multiple times. This book doesn't really look like it's been read too many times. And the paper's pretty nice. You got a little dog ear there on the inside, but well, most buyers aren't going to beat you up too much on that. Centerfold's nice and tight. That paper looks nice and white. This is better than my copy, frankly. So I think this one's going to be another 7. And what would make me go to a 7.5 or an 8? Well, a 7.5 if I had a few fewer ticks. Like I said, we've got about 7 or 8 right in here, and these ones right in the middle are fairly heavy. The blunting, and this kind of wear down here. You take away any 2 or 3 of those things, I could get this book into a 7.5 real easy. And it could almost get into an 8. But I think I'm going to call that a 7 again. Again, it looks obviously red. It's not new. And a very fine wants to look, almost at first glance like it's new. This one doesn't. You've got some heavy stresses and tears here along the spine, right in there. A couple up here at the staple. Some heavy wear here on this corner. An abrasion, it's rubbed on something. Some impact stress here. And right in here, about the mid to 3/4 way up, is where you often see damage, indents, folds on this edge of the cover, and that's generally where somebody was holding it with their thumb and not being real careful while they were reading it. There's also kind of like a fold, right in, it's about that long, right there. I don't know how well you can see it. And we have some impact down the bottom, and this edge is worn. A little bit of stoiling on the back. You can see there's multiple folds here on this corner. Another fold there. And the paper is a little, off-white, approaching tan. And this folding on a lot of the interior pages. Centerfold's tight. So it's a solid book. It's a complete book. But I think I'm going to call that a 4 or 5, a very good plus. And what would get into a 5? Well, if it didn't have that fold there, if this wasn't as heavy, if this wasn't as heavy, one or two or fewer of these or not as heavy, this could be a 5. It's hard to get into a 5 though with that fold, because that's a little bit of a tear right there. This book really doesn't have much of a prayer of getting to a 5, 5, or 6 with these folds on the back and the soiling. And the paper quality is frankly going to keep it out of the very fine range. So yeah, I'm going on that one. I'm going with a 4 or 5, a very good plus. And this is a decent looking book. This one right here. So we have next to no stresses here. A few very minor stresses. That one right there is about the heaviest, but almost none of them break color except for that one. This blunting here could almost be a bindery defect as opposed to a handling defect. Same down there. Nice and flat along the edges. Along this edge, the corners are nice and flat. It's got nice color gloss. The back is almost brilliantly white. That's nice. Very little to no stressing at all along here. Paper quality is nice. The book is complete. Let's check that centerfold just always to make sure. Where did it go? There it is, nice and tight. Everything looks good. You always want to check the first page too. I mean, you should check the inside covers, the centerfold, but always check page 1, because if some kid writes their name in the book, that invariably is almost always where they will do it. This is a real nice looking book. This one is just have a little bit of a blunting right there. I'm going to call this one an 8, 5. There's a little micro tear right here, like less than 1/8 of an inch right there. And I bet that corresponds to right about where we see that indentation right there. So something struck the book there. dented it here and made a little tear right there. So that's going to make it, I think, an 8. Otherwise, I was at an 8.5, and I was, until I saw that we had an actual little tear there, I was on the verge of calling it a 9. But as it is, I'm going to go with an 8. And again, but for that indentation, which on this side is a little bit of a tear, I'd be at an 8.5 and almost at a 9. I could have put a 9 on it without feeling too badly about it afterwards. But as it is, I'm going to call it an 8. And I think somebody still is going to bid on that as an 8, buy it, and be pretty happy with it. I don't know that there's anybody that's going to complain about that being graded as an 8. And that's it. That was that stack of books. I hope you learned something. I hope you had fun anyway. If not listening to me babble about grading, then at least looking at some cool old X-Men comics. Anyway, that's it for this video. We will see you the next time out. And until then, goodbye, good luck, and please be good to each other.